Hi, welcome back to my analog series. Today's topic is a little bit different than usual because normally, as you know, I'll talk about different film cameras, different film stocks and all that analog gear that I fell in love with over the last years, and my bank account hates me for that. But nevertheless, today we're going to talk about emulating the film look on digital photography. As you can see here, I have Lightroom loaded up behind me, and we're gonna explore two different ways of emulating the film look and getting your digital files to have a similar feeling to the analog photos. Of course, you can't really replicate the analog shooting experience completely because the cameras work differently, the shooting experience is a completely different one. And of course, from a digital camera, you get digital files, while from an analog camera, you have a chemical process to get a negative or a color positive, depending on the film you shoot. So there's the first big difference, but you can try and replicate the colors and the feel afterwards, and we're gonna do that today. The main things that I look out for when emulating film are the colors, grain, bloom, and halation. And the most important one to me is color, because this really sells the effect and gives it that analog vibe in the end if you nail the colors. It's the hardest part as well, but I think it's the most important one. And what I do to try to replicate those colors is, for example, I take my Nikon FA and my digital camera that is filming me right now, and I go out on a photo walk and take pictures of the same subject. And I try to get the pictures to be as alike as possible, so I can grade from the analog file to get a close comparison to it with my digital file. And another thing is I have a color chart at my closet, and every time when I shoot a film stock, a new one that I'm quite excited about, and I'm curious about the colors, I take a picture of that color chart with the same lighting and the same lens as I would shoot on my Sony. And that is one of the workflows that really helped me to get those colors, or try to get those colors, let's say like that. Of course, the other properties, as I said, grain, bloom, and halation. And bloom and halation are nearly impossible to get in Lightroom. You would have to open Photoshop, for example, to do that. And normally I'm too lazy because I don't really like to work in Photoshop. And that is where the other way comes in that I'm going to talk about today, and that is Dehancer. As I said last video, Dehancer reached out to me and asked me to do a review about their plugin. So take this video with a grain of salt if you want to. I just want to be open, honest, and clear about this. But they won't get to see the video before it's published, and I can say whatever the hell I want about the plugin. If you want to try it out for yourself, there is a, I think, 7-day free trial on their website. You can download the plugin for free and try it out for a week. After that, you have to buy a license if you want to keep using it. There is a lifetime license and some subscription licenses. If you want to buy it, feel free to use my affiliate code. You get 10% off, and it really helps me out. So if you do, thank you very much. But without no further ado, what is Dehancer? Dehancer is a film emulation plugin that is created for photo and video work, so you can use it in DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro, Final Cut, or like I do in Lightroom, but also in Photoshop, Capture One, and Affinity. There is also an iOS app that we're going to talk about later on. And the cool thing is they have a lot of articles on the website where they explain how they create the film looks and how they are improving the plugin. And they use a similar approach to me, of course, with more resources and more knowledge. But it's quite interesting. So they have sample pictures taken with different film stocks and see how it reacts to pushing, pulling, and so on. I'll just put a link to that article in the description, so if you're interested in, you can read it if you want to. But let's just take a look at how the plugin works. So after downloading and installing Dehancer, it's quite easy to set up. So let's just go to our preferences. And as you can see here, I chose Dehancer for Lightroom with TIFF 16-bit resolution of 300 dpi. And to work with Dehancer, you simply just look at your image. As you can see, I did some basic corrections with a white balance change, a little bit of exposure compensation, a small S-curve, a little bit of denoise, and some changes in the calibration. So nothing too fancy, but to give it an overall vibe that I want to go with. And to use Dehancer, just right click the picture, do edit in Dehancer, yes, and then it should load up. And this is Dehancer. So you have your settings on the right and some settings on the left. Right now we have our presets. Those are the ones that I made over the last weeks, but you have some that Dehancer made, so you could use those as well, just as they are, or if you want to tweak them, you can do that as well. But we're gonna work with the preset that I created especially for this picture. So let's just apply that one, and here we go. So as you can see, here all the sliders are changed, and back here, as you can see, we have the Astrum color negative selected for this image. Those profiles all work like LUTs. So they're basically like lookup tables. They apply a color grade to your image that replicates the look of some films. For example, this one is Astrum. We have Cine still down here, some Fuji motion picture stocks, some Fuji stocks as well, some Kodak, Ilford. I think about 50 different stocks. You can filter them by choosing color negative motion, color positive, and so on. Well, let's just stick with the Astrum color. You can't really change the overall strength of the LUT, but you can change the look of the LUT by applying push and pull. So this slider just emulates the way the film would look if you would push or pull it. So for example, if you would push it, it would get colder, like this, or if we would want to pull it, it would get warmer, something like that. But we're gonna stay at 0. So what I did here is just apply some warmth and some more greenish tint. I usually don't use this exposure slider because it doesn't work like the Lightroom slider. In fact, I don't really like it because, for example, if I want to push it one stop, you can see the highlights are completely blown out. So I don't really like it, so I just stick with it at 0. But there's another exposure slider that works quite well. So what I did here is boost the contrast in the film developer page and some gamma correction, some color boost, nothing too fancy. The film compression is quite nice, so let's just zoom in on the highlights and take a look at it. So as you can see here, the highlights get a little more darker, so let's open up the waveform down here. So if we would deselect it, you can see the waveform in the highlights moves slightly to the left. It basically acts like an emulation for the highlight roll-off, and you can change different settings on your personal liking. That's the way I went for this photo. Then we have an expand tool, so you can push and pull the specular highlights and the highlights in general up or down. Let's just take a look what I did here. As you can see, I pushed the black point more to the right, so it gets more dark in the blacks, and the white point a little to the left, so it gets a little brighter to work against the film compression, but to keep the highlight roll off. As you can see here, it gives it a little more of a punchy contrast without changing the saturation too much. Down here we have a print film emulation, so you can choose different print films for this picture. I normally use the Kodak Endura glossy paper because this one is the best suited for me. It's basically just the emulation of a print film paper. So if you would like to choose linear, as you can see, it's a lot brighter, but this profile keeps the overall exposure of the image without changing the colors too much. And this is basically the same, but with more contrast and more punch in it. We have the two different Fuji and Kodak print film emulations and Cineon Filmlog. Filmlog is a log format. I don't really know why it's in the Lightroom version, but in the video version it makes perfect sense. Another thing that I really like is the analog range limiter. So as you can see here, it changes the overall contrast. So the range limiter gives it a little more of a compressed look, less contrasty, and I really like it. As you can see, I pushed the contrast a little bit again in the print, but not too much. Down here we have the color head, so you can see here a little more blue, a little more green, and I didn't touch the red and cyans. In the shadows I gave it a little more warm tones, in the midtones as well, and I put down the highlights to a more bluish tone, so you can just work your way through those and figure out which settings are the best for your picture. Down here we have the film grain, and as you can see here I chose a custom template, so with negative, analog, and those are all the settings. But if you don't want to do it custom, you can work with all the presets that you have here, so 8mm, 16, 35 and up to 65mm, so quite nice to have that. The cool thing, if you would choose for example 8mm and then go to custom, the customs would have been changed to the 8mm, so you could customize the 8mm look, and that is quite nice. Further on we have the halation, and as you can see here it's up on the upper sides here, so if we would deselect it, as you can see the red glow disappears. Let's apply it again, and as you can see here, those are just the settings I work with, and you have a mask mode so you can see which parts of the image are affected by the halation, and of course you have the presets, so 8mm up to 65, always with ramjet and with no ramjet. The no ramjet is more aggressive looking. So like for example the Cinestill 800T is a classic example for a motion picture stock that is respooled and the ramjet layer is removed, so it has those really prominent red halo effects around the highlights. When I didn't want to go too crazy on that picture, so that's why I took a custom approach. Down here we have the bloom, another thing for the highlights. It's a little bit like a glow. So it emulates the way OLED glass and some film stocks would react to bright highlights. So let's take a look at it. And as you can see here around the door and the highlight parts of the wall, so they get a little more faded and glowy. As you can see, here's some mask mode as well, so you can see again, like in the halation, which parts are affected. Of course, you have your presets 8, 16, 35 and 65mm. I normally go with custom, but you could use them as well. Down here we have the film damage, which is quite nice. Those are those little scratches and dust particles. There are some presets. You have a custom thingy as well. With a lot of settings, I normally go with a preset because you have so many options in the custom one. And if you're not happy with the result, you can always click on refresh and see another one. So that's quite nice indeed. And down here we have vignette and overscan. I normally don't use the vignetting tool because, yeah, I just use the one in Lightroom, which works quite the same. But the overscan is really a cool feature. As you can see here, we could apply a film border look, so we have the sprockets and everything, and we can change, for example, the orientation. So now it's horizontal, so we could scale it up and give it a slight border if we wanted to. We have the different presets up to Ultra Panavision and down to Super 8. Not going to use one of these now, but it's a quite cool tool, I think. So let's just hit OK and apply the look, and this is our finished picture. And the nice thing about working with a 16-bit TIFF is the fact that we're able of getting a lot of details back. So for example, if we would wanted to change the temperature a little bit, let's go back to let's say -4 and push the green slider a little bit as well. Push up the texture to round about, let's say 10, 20, something like that. Yeah, as you can see, we have quite a lot of room. So for example, if we wanted to expose the image in a different way, we could also push it one stop. Of course, it doesn't look that great anymore, but around half of a stop is still perfectly fine and natural looking. So because of the fact that this is a 16-bit TIFF, we do have some range to work here. And this is actually my workflow. So I take a picture. Let's, for example, go up here in the pictures that I used in my last video, and I color grade it. I do a basic color grading, and then I go through Dehancer, and after that I tweak some last things, the same I would do with my film scans. So that is one of the reasons why I quite like using Dehancer. Of course, it slows down my workflow because I work on every picture 3 times, but I love the results, and if I'm not in a hurry to finish the pictures, this is a workflow that I really enjoy. As you can see, I did some corrections like I would do on film scans, just to give it a little more of the vibe that I want to go with. And yeah, that is basically the workflow that I'm doing in Dehancer. Let me just go through the pictures and we'll see each other in a minute. Thank you very much to the colleague of mine who lent me his iPad so I can try out the Dehancer app for the weekend. I loaded up several photos and a video file because this app is actually capable of working with video and with photo, and I'm quite curious how it works. To be fair, I'm not the biggest fan of mobile editing apps. It's just not my cup of tea. I personally prefer working on a PC with keyboard and a bigger monitor. But nevertheless, I guess let's give it a shot. As you can see here, we have all the presets as you would have in the Lightroom version. So you can apply one of these to your liking and tweak it afterwards. Let's go with the Fuji Neopan, for example, or one of those. So they work perfectly fine. Can go in the in-depth controls around here. We have all the same settings, but also a cropping tool that you would have in the Lightroom version with temperature and tint, the different film stocks. Let's go with the Kodak Eastman, film developer, compression for the nice highlight roll off, the black and the white point, the film, print film emulation, color head, film grain, halation, bloom, vignetting, film damage, and the overscan. So all the same features and controls that you would have in the Lightroom or DaVinci Resolve version, so it works the same. I have to cut myself off here for a minute because I had some issues while working with the app, because the images and video files that I loaded up weren't recognized by the iPad gallery nor by the app, and I didn't really know how to fix the issue. But the next day my colleague could help me out and I was able to edit the video files and the images. And I will show you the results in a minute. But concerning the grading part for the videos, it's basically the same as for the images. So you have the same settings, the same controls, and it works quite well. I mean, the export time was quite slow, but the iPad is an older model, so I'm thinking that that was the reason for that. Overall, fun experience. As I've said, it's just not my cup of tea, those editing apps, but for someone who likes its workflow and likes mobile apps for editing, I think this app is really well made. To wrap it up, who is this plugin for and what are my thoughts after using the Lightroom version for a month and the DaVinci Resolve version for 1.5 years. Let's talk about the elephant in the room first, and that is the price of Dehancer. Dehancer isn't cheap, so if you're not willing to spend some money on the plugin, that plugin isn't for you, because it's not that cheap. But I want to be fair to that and compare it to the actual price of shooting film and the competitors. So I always looked at the lifetime licenses, not the yearly subscriptions or monthly fees that some of these plugins offer, just the lifetime. Dehancer Pro for DaVinci Resolve costs about $500, including taxes. Film Convert Nitrate, a cheaper option, costs $170, and I don't know why, but Filmbox costs $1,000. So to compare these, Dehancer sits quite in the middle, and I just looked up the prices for 60mm film, not 35, just 16. And one roll of 100 feet of 60mm Vision 3 250D costs $70, plus scanning and developing about $80, so you get 3 minutes of footage for $150. So considering that, the price of Dehancer seems quite fair. On the other side, we have the Dehancer Film plugin, which is the photo version for Lightroom and so on, costs around $200. And the prices around my location for Kodak Portra are $20 per roll, plus developing a scan at my lab is about $15, so I would spend $35 for one roll of Kodak Portra. And considering that I only have to shoot like, yeah, I guess like 6 or 7 rolls of Portra to buy Dehancer, I think it's quite a fair price. Looking back at my experiences after using the Lightroom version for a month and the DaVinci Resolve version for 1.5 years, I can really say I like the plugin. I mean, that is the whole reason why I made this video. I like the plugin, I like the work that the Dehancer team put into this plugin. I can see that they respect the medium film and they wanted to create a plugin, a film emulation plugin that is capable and respectful to film itself, and I think they made it, and it's a really nice tool. Of course, not the cheapest one out there, but I think one of the best. But of course, it comes with some issues. Nothing is perfect. I really enjoy the user experience, I enjoy the layout, I enjoy the customization that is possible with custom grain, custom halation, custom bloom, and the possibility of saving presets, exporting presets so you can have them on another device as well, and all of that. But one thing that I never noticed it, but a friend of mine who uses the Lightroom version for over a year now told me that there was a tool where you could download the presets that other Dehancer users created. So not just the Dehancer team presets and my own presets, but the presets from other people. And I don't know why, but they killed the feature, and I can see why he is upset with that. And I would have seen myself using this tool as well, because I would just be curious how other people would use the presets, how they would change it, how it would look on my photos, and if I could use it for my work as well, if I like the preset. So they killed it, I don't know why. And one thing that really bugs me is the fact that you can't customize the film profiles. I mean, not customizing the colors, but customizing the strength. So you have the push and pull slider, which is a great thing, but that doesn't change the strength. It changes the overall look. And I really wish, especially for the video editing part, that you have the possibility to change the strength. So yeah, I work around it with 2 nodes. So I have Dehancer on one node, but only the film profile selected, and on the other node I have Dehancer, but the film profile deselected. And then on the film profile node, I can lower the opacity of the whole node and change the opacity of the film profile like this. But that's an annoying workaround, and I really hope they consider this to be part of a future update, because I really think it would help. Because sometimes you don't want the whole film profile, you just want to have it, give it a little bit of a touch, a little bit of the vibe. but not the whole look. Another thing that would be great if they would include it someday is bleach bypass. I mean, it's a film emulation profile, a plugin, not profile, sorry, a plugin, and you have so many possibilities in this plugin, and it's really well made, and it's a great tool, and I really like it. With the overscans, the film gates, flicker editions, and all of that comes. It's not in the Lightroom version, of course, because film gate weave and flicker is something for motion picture, but you have all of these options. You can customize these, fit them to your liking, and I think adding to this a bleach bypass effect would be great, because bleach bypass, famously used in Saving Private Ryan by Steven Spielberg or Seven by David Fincher, is a different process of developing film. So as you know, they have the push and pull sliders, which is also a different way of developing film. But bleach bypass means that you have your main ingredients for developing film. So you have your developer, your fixer, and your bleach. And by bleach bypass, you skip the bleach, so you only do fixer and developer. And this creates a picture that is quite contrasty but desaturated. And as you know, if you crank up the contrast on a digital file, it creates more saturation as well. And a bleach bypass effect does the opposite. You get a contrasty image with less saturation. It gets more gritty, more moody, and I would really like to see that in Dehancer. I think it would be a great addition, and it would be a lot of fun for, I guess, for me, but maybe for someone else too. So overall, would I recommend Dehancer? If you shoot film, or if you just like to emulate the film look, you like this vintage aesthetic, then I think Dehancer is a great option, because it's really well crafted. You have a lot of options inside the plugin to choose from, a lot of customizations, and the different parts of the plugin are really well crafted. And I think it's a great tool. Of course, it's not the cheapest option out there, but I think it's fair priced in the end. Overall, I really enjoyed using Dehancer for Lightroom as well as for DaVinci Resolve, and I'll definitely see myself coming back to these tools to use them again in the future for my work, because my workflow isn't the fastest with Dehancer in Lightroom, but I like the results that come from it, and I really dig the images that were created using Dehancer. And it just fits the way I want to create photos and videos, to give it those vintage filmic vibes, and the way I use old vintage glass as well to capture images. I think it's quite fitting for me. If it's something for you, you have to figure out for yourself. As I said, 7-day free trial, doesn't cost you $1 and you can try it out. Yeah, I hope I could give you a little insight in Dehancer, as well in the way I approach editing pictures. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and until next time, take care and more pictures.